I know a lot of us know what Michigan brings to the table because we've been watching them every week, whether you're in the Michigan media, whether you are a fan, you have a pretty good idea of who and what Michigan football is from your perspective. We're now going to go to a national perspective from someone who also has a pretty good idea of who Michigan is. We're going to discuss that with Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And this line, I always do this wrong on camera. Let's see. There it is. I actually got the pointing right. The person over to my left, Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic. She also, at one point in time, was at USA Today proper, and also the Michigan Daily. We've seen her grow in amazing ways, and now I consider her to be the best of the best in all of college football writerdom. So, Nicole, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yes, shout out to the Michigan Daily. We can talk about the Daily State News, like that game getting canceled, by the way, at some point on the show, but very excited to be with you. It's been too long. I feel like we haven't run into each other on a sideline in too long. I
know, right? And I asked you before air whether or not you were at Minnesota because I saw the NBC News because you're also with NBC Sports rather, and I never went over to that side to even see you or Josh or any of the people that I know and like. I just was so locked in like the team. But I'm glad to see you now. It's been since Big Ten Media Days, I think. So nonetheless, obviously you pay close attention to Michigan football amongst all of the other teams in college football. But we have a pretty good idea here on this show of our impressions of Michigan. But when you take a 30,000 foot view and you look at what Michigan has done so far, what they look like, what do you see? What do you think of this Michigan team?
Well, I think this is a very well-timed podcast because we've seen two complete and dominant performances the last two times we've seen Michigan out. I think, we were coming into the season, waiting to see Michigan and Georgia look like they have been looking recently as like what they are when they're firing on all cylinders, when they're winning games the way that they want to. And we first saw that for Michigan against Nebraska. And, we talk about this all the time about like how Jim Harbaugh is happy winning games. And obviously he wasn't on the sidelines for the first couple games, which is part of the reason, there were just some disjointed moments or JJ making mistakes that he doesn't characteristically make. But it's also like, Jim Harbaugh is happy winning a game that looks uglier than like us wanting to watch a football game looks, right? Like when he first came back and you look at the stat lines and it's like, it's fine. Like, I mean, it's not like Michigan was like out of control of the game at any point, but, I'm sure they could do better. And he's still thrilled and he's, doing all of his, his comparisons to war and all these different things about ground attacks and all the things he loves. But really like what we saw against Nebraska and then Minnesota is close to firing on all cylinders. I still think there's another level with the vertical passing game that we've kind of talked about for 2 years with JJ, but like really controlling the game and just kind of sucking the life out of your opponent. That's what Michigan wants to do. Like this defense is phenomenal. It's terrific. And yes, maybe they haven't, been tested against some of the high flying offenses that some of the other top teams have, but they're doing everything that they want to do. And then they're controlling the game. And Jim's able to get the players out of the game. He talked about, I thought one of the most interesting things anyone said all season was what he was talking about running back usage this year and how he was comfortable taking Blake Corum out of a game 3 yards short of 100 yards because it didn't matter if he got to 100 yards. The stat line and, trying to maybe have some resume that like might get Heisman Trophy consideration, that doesn't matter. He's trying to limit and spread around the carries. And so I just feel like they're doing everything that they want to do. They're very comfortable in how they're winning games. And I think if you've been watching Penn State and Ohio State, you come away feeling really good about Michigan and the way that they would match up against those two teams. That's where I am right now.
You mentioned a couple really interesting things, and I'm seeing a lot of. So lately, I've been really indulging in the Twitter X, whatever you want to call it, for you, which is not something I normally like. Okay, I've curated my own list. I want to see what I want to see. And lately I've really enjoyed the For You because I'm seeing a lot of the Michigan State fan Twitter accounts and the Ohio State fan Twitter accounts try to convince themselves that their offense is better than Michigan's because they've got more yards, that that their defense is maybe better for whatever reason. But I mean, you've touched on a couple different things that are interesting. Number one, you're not seeing the full Michigan experience for 4 quarters. Number two, they haven't necessarily played anybody, but you're still seeing them going out and doing what they want to do. How much do you think those things matter? And obviously we're not going to see Michigan take on a team that is considered to be a relatively even contest until mid-November when they go to Penn State. Right. So what are your thoughts on to dig a little bit deeper? What are your thoughts on Michigan hasn't maybe played anybody? Or just the fact that Michigan has been able to rest, that they haven't been able to put out a full 4 quarters with the starters?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they're definitely handling the workloads the way that you'd want to with the schedule like this. And again, I don't fault, like, I understand people are going to go at their schedule over and over again. This happened last year too. But like when a series gets canceled, I mean, like, you can't do anything about it. Like Jim Harbaugh and these players on this team right now can't do anything about the way that the schedule is set up for this season right now in the middle of it. And we also know that their schedule is going to be absolutely loaded next year. So like, that's just going to go, out the door. But I think that there have been opportunities to learn things about this team. And I know maybe nationally people just kind of blanket are like, well, they haven't played anybody. But as someone who covers the Big Ten very closely and is paying attention all the way to the bottom of the league, Rutgers is better. Rutgers is much better defensively. And if they don't get worn down the rest of the year, they're going to win some games. Like, they're definitely going to be bowl eligible, in my opinion. And I think that they're going to win games by running the ball and with their defense, controlling the game the way that Greg Schiano likes to do that. So I was impressed by beating Rutgers and playing Rutgers the way that Michigan did. And Nebraska came into that game as the best rushing defense in the country. And so for Michigan to dominate the game, I thought that game could have stayed close for a little bit coming into it. Like, here's how, here's the formula for maybe Nebraska. Don't make mistakes. It just wasn't even close. It wasn't even a question. So to me, like, they're not benchmarks in the same way like Texas and Oklahoma just had one against each other. But these are opportunities to learn things about Michigan because of the caliber, especially the defenses that they're playing, and understanding which teams have gotten better. That Rutgers and Maryland in particular have both improved in certain ways that are significant. So I am trying to learn from things like that, because you're right. We're not going to learn everything that we need to know about this team until the back half of November. And that's just where it is. Like, we're going to see Ohio State and Penn State play each other much sooner than that. That's going to really help. We saw Ohio State play Notre Dame. Again, Maryland. I'm high on Maryland too. I thought we learned some stuff about Ohio State in that game. In part, the 3 quarters where they struggled, and then where they were able to pull away. So you're not gonna have that with Michigan for a while. So I think you have to kind of measure it against the standard that Michigan has set for how they want to win games, which is what I'm talking about when we say like a complete performance against, Minnesota, where you're able to play basically every single player that you brought in the travel roster. And so you're checking off all the things that you wanted to do and see out of your players in that game, and the depth. So you're getting those game reps for other players. But also, again, like, we had this conversation a lot last year about, okay, what about, the deep ball? Should JJ throw it more? Can he throw it more? What are his numbers going to be on passes that are 10 yards or longer? Like, those are things that you can still watch them progress offensively in, even if they're not playing the best defenses or the best teams in the Big Ten. Like, I still would like to see them stretch the field more that way. Although, again, like last year, okay, who's going to be the receivers that step up, right? We've seen Michigan use tight ends in really, productive and efficient ways. Well, Roman Wilson's that guy this year, right? So you have learned that. We have seen the connection between him and JJ McCarthy. So again, it's like you're looking for specific things, and also against the standard of the way that Michigan really like presented itself and won the big games the last 2 years. And so I think you can still envision and see where they might match up, or where their strengths and weaknesses are going to be against Penn State and Ohio State, even though we still have a month plus to get there.
Well, I do want to ask about that. Then we'll get to the state news versus Michigan Daily of it all. But before we even move on, I mean, you had a really interesting point about Rutgers. I mean, when I saw Rutgers, I mean, I've been to how many Rutgers games, whether it's been on the sidelines or up in the press box. I think it's been like 5 or 6. I haven't covered every single. I know I missed the one in 2018. So every other one since then. It was the first time that I saw Rutgers take the field, and it was during the opening kickoff that I said, that actually looks like a Big Ten team for the first time.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a prescient notion. And Michigan also said, what Stafford told me before the game, he said, this is, we feel, the biggest contest that we have until Penn State. And they felt like they passed that. So we're going to continue on with Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic, from NBC, are you still doing SiriusXM? I haven't tuned in since SiriusXM. Is up from SiriusXM,
Sure.
ESPNU. Does a little bit of everything. I'm just a little bit sleepy just hearing the level of the amount of stuff that you do. But nonetheless, we'll get back to you in just a moment. Before we do continue on with Nicole, listen, PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, and you pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types that are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So anyway, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. You can use the promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com. /LockedOnCollege, using the promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Additionally, y'all know how many times that I have told you about my concert going experience always being last minute. Last year, trying to go to Justin Bieber, ended up spending a fortune, was really stressed. Sarah was like, I want to go, wanted to get floor seats. I know Nicole just recently went to Taylor Swift out in SoFi with our other good friend. I just can't remember names all of a sudden. Anyway, Mike Golick Jr. There's an easy way to make sure that you secure your ability to go to a concert, to a sporting event, to a comedy show, whatever it is. You don't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next event because Gametime exists. It's the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with last-minute deals. They're killer, absolutely amazing. All-in prices viewed from your seat and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So last-minute tickets, check, all the way up until the actual event starts. That's the amazing thing. Also, you can see the seats. I've told you about when I went and saw Wicked and I was behind a column. That date did not go well. Anyway, Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats, find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, everything under the sun. With zone deals, you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And with the Gametime guarantee, that means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LockedOnCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LockedOnCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's continue back with Nicole. If you wonder why I'm like, it seems like this arm is shaking, is because I have a puppy down here that wants all of the attention right now.
Aww.
Zuri, do you want to come on screen? Everyone always asks to see Zuri when they're watching it on video. There she kind of is.
Aww.
She just demands all of the
Sweetheart.
attention. She heard your voice and she came running. So that says something about you, Nicole. It's something positive, of course. Let's talk about I want to talk about all of the rivals next, and we can start with the next time that Michigan's going to see a rival, and that's Michigan State. But as you alluded to, an important game that I've never seen it in person, but I literally every Friday night before the battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy, I'm always checking the accounts of anyone who has ever been involved with the Michigan Daily, current and past, to see what the reaction is when inevitably, the Michigan Daily blows out the state news in the annual touch flag football game. And yet it has been canceled by the state news. They offered instead to have a joint editorial to make real change, in which that has drawn the ire of all of the Michigan Daily students that have been long waiting for their opportunity to partake. What are your thoughts on all of this? What's the real solution here? That should they just continue the game as normal? What do you think?
Well, I am crushed to hear that it's not going to happen this year. I hope that they are able to sit down, the students on both sides, and bring it back next year. It's something that is just like really important and such a unique experience for student papers. Like, there's not that many rivalries across the country that have all these pieces to them that are not tied to the actual football game or like the day of. And we love and celebrate all of the weird traditions that are around games and all the things that people do. And this one is the student newspapers playing touch football the night before the game. It's always in the college town of where the game is. So, we would play on like Elbow Field, and they would rent out, whatever the field is next to Spartan Stadium. It's not good football. Like, these are unathletic sports writers, right? So it's, as a Daily, like, we were 4-0 in my years, which most of my friends are, because it's been 18 straight years that the Daily has won this game. But we would practice for the month leading up, and like there was just all of this like staff camaraderie across sections, because it wasn't only the sports section that would play. And that was really fun. Like, we looked forward to those practices. We looked forward to the game and, getting face paint for it and what everyone was going to wear and how we were going to do it. And then, like, I feel connected to the staffs after me by checking in on that game. Like, it's how you stay up with who's there. Like, who are the students now? Who are the sports editors now? And it definitely is heated, and I can understand people thinking that the rivalry itself and kind of every piece of that, including the student newspaper rivalry, is maybe too toxic right now. And again, that's why I'm like, well, maybe, let cooler heads prevail and work something out. But it ties like the Daily kids to the state news kids. Like, Chris Manini and I talk about this all the time because we are close friends now at the Athletic. But like, we hated each other because we played against each other in the Daily State News game for 3 years. And I did not grow up in the state of Michigan, so I didn't have this like innate hate for Michigan State as a Michigan student. I hated the state news. Like, that was I cared so much more about beating the state news than about the game that was played the next day, because you had dueling columns in the student newspapers that day too. And it just like, it was a true rivalry. So Chris and I talk about that now because like, I think that makes us closer friends now, because like, we experienced this thing together. And I'm friends with a lot of people who played on the other side of that game, and they tried to do an alumni game one year. I know, it can be dangerous. Again, these are unathletic people who are trying to do athletic things for a little bit. It is not attractive football. I made my parents come one year, and they were like, what the hell did you bring us to? Because no one was scoring touchdowns. Like, it was rough. It's not pretty. It's not aesthetically pleasing, but I hope they're able to bring it back, because it is, again, it's something that so many other friends who've gone to other schools have said they were jealous that they never had anything like it. It was something that brought our staff together, and then ultimately a shared experience that helps me keep up with the current students and also the alums on the other side. So I'm hopeful it comes back, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen this year, and that's a huge bummer. But it's not my decision, and I hope that people who are going to make the decision can get together and hopefully make a different one next year.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that collegial kind of spirit as well, especially with, like you said, the rivalry is pretty toxic at this point. I mean, I certainly don't even want to go to the game in East Lansing in a week and a half, But I was very much looking forward to, I check your Twitter account. I check Scott Bell, obviously very different former Michigan daily experiences as far as the types of things that you're going to see. But when it came to that game, it was just, it was the camaraderie that continues to exist. So it is a shame that is going by the wayside for this year, at least. And especially I have fond moments just thinking about when you were in school, because I followed you on Twitter all the way back when, not to make you sound old, because I'm a heck of a lot older. But it's, that was kind of, I think, when I finally learned of the game. I didn't know about it when I was a Michigan student, and that would have been when the streak started, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, 18. I mean, I'm still going to text Nittany and Joe Rexroad and all my pals on the other side when this game is not played, because still 18-0. We're still unbeaten here and still on a winning streak. But yeah, it's going to feel different not having that. Like I've covered that game the day after, as an alum, like for, The Athletic or USA Today. And like, that's what people are buzzing about. That's what everyone's talking about. And so that'll be a little bit of a bummer to not have that too. So hopefully it comes back. That would be my plea to those who can make it happen next year.
We're going to continue on with Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic, NBC Sports, SiriusXM. She's everywhere. We're going to continue on with her in just one moment. But before we do, listen, I am someone who has long wanted to get one of these, and I went out and did it, and I am so happy that I did. I got it for Sarah and the boys so that they have no worries. In particular, I'm going to get a separate one for me before too long, and I'm talking about the Jase case. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. It gives you the peace of mind so that you aren't just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Listen, with everything that's going on in the world right now, don't get caught flat-footed. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. And Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared, especially in what seem to be pretty scary times right now. So get $20 off of these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Well, let's stay on the rivals here, but let's not. We don't need to talk about Michigan State. I've spent plenty of time talking about Michigan State. The ones that are expected to be the challengers to Michigan are Penn State and Ohio State. Like you said, you've paid attention to where they are and what you see from them. What do you see from both of those teams? What do you feel like you've learned, and how do you think they compare to Michigan in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting because one of the most insightful quotes I think we got from anyone last year was James Franklin talking about how they had spent the last however many years recruiting to try to beat Ohio State. And so that was like the type of athlete and literally like the measurements and the skill sets for like the defensive line. And then Michigan comes in and elevates, and they play so differently, right? And they want to just bulldoze you up front, control the clock, less worried about, the athletes in space and spreading out your defense. And that was going to be a problem for Penn State. Like they're going to have to adjust how they're recruiting. And I still think that Penn State is probably built better to beat Ohio State because of that, because of the way that they both recruit and where their strengths are. So I'll start with Penn State because I was there for their opener against West Virginia, which that's a better win than I think people thought it was going to be, because West Virginia has been better than we thought they were going to be. And I think
lost so far, I believe, right?
That's their only loss, and Neil Brown has basically coached himself off the hot seat. So that has been impressive. But that was Drew Aller's first start, big time atmosphere, and he looked really good. He's been up and down. They've had to win games despite, he's thrown for under 50% against Illinois in different moments. They struggled in that first half against Northwestern. So the questions are for them, where are the explosive plays? They had so many of them last year. Both of the running backs would break off these big runs. This is an offense that we've seen so many great receivers come out of because they've had these just incredible deep balls and one-on-one They come down with the ball, and we haven't really seen that this year. I think they've obviously been a little bit more consistent, and they've been winning, and I think they're comfortable in the way that they've won these games, but still missing that piece. I also want to know, defensively, like they got a lot of negative plays against Northwestern. They've got individual stars on each level. But again, when they're up against an offense like an Ohio State or a Michigan, where are we going to see that? Where are their real strengths and weaknesses defensively? I think those are going to be really interesting. And then Ohio State, they go and they beat Notre Dame in a game that I think they were outplayed. But that final drive, you learn so much about Kyle McCord and who this offense can be. And the defense has been improved overall. I thought Notre Dame and Sam Hartman would be able to pick apart a lot in that defense. They didn't do that. But Maryland was outplaying Ohio State for most of that game a week ago. And if Leah Tagovailoa didn't keep both teams in the game and make mistakes, because he's done that, then they could have been in control in that game. And it would have been really interesting to see how Ohio State would respond. But I still think they've got questions about the run game. Can they establish a run game? Can it be consistent? And then again, what about some of these quarterbacks that are going to be able to pick it apart? Even Maryland, I know the rushing stats weren't impressive at the end of the day, but it looked like they were able to run and get yardage when they needed to against this defense. So still have a lot of questions about the defense as a whole. Obviously, they've been limiting the amount of explosive plays this year compared to years past. But part of the reason that, Lou Holtz had some points, right, in his critiques of Ohio State is because no matter what Ohio State does, and Ryan Day has obviously been on this point about toughness and saying that, getting that final yard against Notre Dame proved something about how tough they are. The toughness is going to come in the Michigan game. This narrative was set because of the way Michigan beat them 2 years ago. And that's what they're fighting. So we can learn a lot about Ohio State, but we won't learn everything we need to until they are lined up against Michigan. And Michigan's offensive line is trying to bully their defensive front. And that's where we'll learn if Ohio State has improved, if Ohio State's defense is different, if they can actually win that rivalry game, because Michigan is still built in the way that they want to and the way that they know they can win that game. And Ohio State's the one that needs to prove that they can do it differently. And so I think you're still going to have all those questions until those specific two teams meet. But I do think Ohio State and Penn State have flaws. And it'll be interesting to see when they play each other, but then also how they address and try to improve as the season goes on. Because again, Kyle McCord had one great drive. Want to see, how that plays out into the rest of the season. But I still don't know that I have as much faith in this offense as a whole that I've had over the last couple of years. And especially the lack of the run game has been concerning because you've had, Travion Henderson coming back and the flashes we've seen from him when he was healthy. I just still have a lot of questions, I think, about both of those teams. And despite Michigan not playing the level of competition that certainly Ohio State has played to date, I just feel like they are close to playing exactly how they want. And they are taking teams out of games. They are just closing the door and they are just sucking the life out of them in these games, which is something that I think Ohio State fans and Penn State fans would like to see. They don't want to see a first half like Penn State and Northwestern. They don't want to see what Maryland was doing to Ohio State for almost 3 quarters. They want to win games the way that Michigan is winning their games. So I feel like they're further along into the identity of who they are, what they want to be, and so consistent on both sides right now that, yes, I still want to see, again, stretching the field, what that could do to open up things for the run game. Donovan Edwards has been a lot quieter than I was expecting him to be this year, but I have less questions about Michigan than I do the other two.
There are two interesting points out of that. And I think the one that is something that I noticed that PJ Fleck in his postgame, we talked about this on the show a couple of days ago. I've never seen a coach just completely, he didn't go in and say, well, if we just would have executed better, we weren't being ourselves or whatever. It was the entire time was, did you guys see how great Michigan was? He was almost gushing over Michigan. I've never seen that type of thing happen. And I think that's I know it's going to be really interesting. And also with the Ohio State toughness, I think the most apt quote that I saw come out of that in response to Ryan Day was my former mentor, Steve Lorenz over at 24/7 Sports, who said, I wasn't sure until 20 seconds ago that Michigan is in Ryan Day's head. And it seems pretty obvious at this point. So I'll be interested to see how those games come along. But Nicole, we'll let you go. You can follow her at Nicole Auerbach on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I want to call it Twitter, but I don't want to confuse anybody. You can also see her on NBC Sports. You can read her stuff on The Athletic, which I do. I am a subscriber to The Athletic, a paid subscriber. And you can listen to her on SiriusXM after Full Ride on at the 1 o'clock hour intermittently, depends on the day. And she does an excellent job, and she is a Michigan alumna, so give her praise. So thank you, Nicole, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me anytime.